Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to a new episode of the Global Dawah Movement Show. Today's show, I believe, is going to be one of a special show, I think, because it is such an interesting thing. I was listening to The Magic of Reality, Richard Dawkins' book for children. It's basically how to bring children to atheism and skepticism and this sort of thing. And he said something which I think a lot of people out there believe. And he's actually probably one of the only few people who actually talks about it so openly, which is he's trying to tell children how you know something's real is when you can use your senses to find out if it's there, using your hands, your eyes, your ears, or you use some sort of instruments, or you make up some sort of model about the world and a hypothesis, and then you test it against reality, and then you see whether it's true. Now, do you think that's the right sort of thing we should be telling children, that this is how you know what's real and all the rest is basically mythology?
I think I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He is quite sincere in that he wants children to basically have the right tools in order to understand the empirical world. So we need a rational scientific method to use in order to basically understand the world and reality. But he's oversimplified it. It's quite simplistic. And it can be quite dangerous. And can lead to contradictions. And I want to expose what he's saying with an example. I want to ask you a question, bro. Do you believe China is real? Do you believe it exists?
Yeah, of course.
You do, right?
Yeah.
If you were a betting man and we don't bet because we're Muslim, how much would you place?
£1,000.
£1,000. Okay, good.
Rubles.
Who? Rubles?
1,000 rubles.
Rubles, okay, good.
Realistic.
So, prove it to me. Prove to me China is real. China exists.
You can see it on the map.
Okay, wait. I want to break it down so you can see it on a map.
Yeah, it's right. We've got a map in here in the office.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So you can see it on a map. But seeing it on a map, bro, is actually not the proof that Richard Dawkins is talking about. Because you can't touch it and feel it, right? You can't do any experiments on a map. The map is literally someone say so. It's a representation of someone saying, here's some lines and this is China.
Yeah, but I can go to a takeaway down, Neasden Market, and there's a Chinese
guy.
Okay,
again, so you could go to a takeaway, so I'm breaking it down. So you go to a takeaway and speak to a Chinese guy. How do you know he's Chinese?
He looks Chinese.
Bro, he might be Japanese. He might be Korean. He's Oriental. But even understanding the word Oriental is still based on someone saying that people who look like this are Oriental. Okay, if I said to you, I'm Greek, is that empirical evidence or testimonial? Is it just my say-so? You have to believe my say-so, bro.
Well, I do, but look...
You may think I'm Pakistani. Look, I look Pakistani, right?
Look, I can put China in Google Images, and then I see, the
Okay, good. So let's break it down. I'm taking every argument you're giving me. So the first two arguments are just testimonial, based on the say-so of others. Someone drew lines on a map, it's the say-so of others. You met a Chinese guy, you got to believe his say-so, right? If I said to you, for example, I'm a Fufulonian. I'm from the island called Fufula.
Well, it doesn't exist. It's not on the map.
How do you know? Do you know the whole map? Okay, name me every single country in the world. Now.
Okay.
You can't, can you?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So the point is, both things that you've given me so far are testimonial. The other thing you said was, type in China on Google and you have Google Maps, right? And it says China. Bro, that's say-so of others.
Yeah, but someone's been there. They use their senses to find out.
Someone has been there.
Yeah.
But how do you know he's been there? He has to tell you, which is testimonial knowledge.
That's fine. He has to tell me, but he actually visually uses his senses.
That's what he said. But how do you know he did that? He said that.
Because I trust him.
You trust him. So all the examples you're giving me so far are testimonial. And then there's another one that I heard recently. Someone said, yes, but I know if I get on a plane, I will go to China. I said, no, I'm not going to let you get away with this one. Because the very fact that you think when you get on that plane you're going to go to China is not based on any empirical evidence. It's based on the fact that someone told you if you go on a plane you go to China.
And you believe China exists right now and you haven't been there yet.
Exactly. And you believe China exists now. It's not based on a potentiality. If you happen to go on a plane, you'd find a place called China. So even if you were to see videos and documentaries of China, it's still the testimony of the people who are taking the videos. So
agreed. It's a source of knowledge. Now, that's clearly missing in the magic of reality.
Exactly. And this is the big problem. And the irony of the magic of reality, the book itself, it relies on that source of knowledge, testimony, the say-so of others. Because Richard Dawkins is making certain points. To understand reality, you have to do X, Y, and Z. He's making points about biology, making points about physics, making points about science. The child or someone who's reading that book, they're not doing the experiments themselves. The irony is they have to believe in what he said because he said it.
What's really interesting is even though this seems very obvious, testimony is a fundamental thing, it's a source of knowledge and it's all the rest. Why do you think, and people are so apprehensive, especially atheist scientists and these lot, to actually accept it as a source of knowledge? And if you remember in Islam or atheism, the debate in London with Professor Krauss, you said to him, do you believe in evolution? And he said, yes. And then he said, well, basically, what's your evidence? Or
I said, have you done all the experiments yourself? Have you done all the studies yourself? He said no. So that shows, and everybody started to laugh actually, because it exposed the fact that he has to still rely on others, on the say-so of others, whether it's written or oral or verbal, in order to understand reality, the reality of evolution. No one's going to do all the experiments.
Why
of
do you
evolution.
think such top scientists just don't know about stuff like this?
Well, they do. It's the popularizers, because if you study the academic works of the philosophers of science, and you study, even go to the Berkeley website, which is a child-like website, it's very basic for people to understand the scientific method. It says that a key part of the scientific method is the collective experiences of other scientists. Now, one would argue, yeah, but we only believe they say so because it agrees with our general collective experiences.
That's testimony again.
But that's the point. And David Hume, all those hundreds of years ago, the Scottish skeptic, said the same thing. He basically said that, hold on a second, we only believe in testimony, and we do agree it's valid and we need it, we can't run away from it, but we believe in the say-so of others because it agrees with our collective experiences. Now, fast forward a couple of hundred years, you have Professor Cody in his book Testimony, a Philosophical Study, published in 1991, I believe. He said, hold on a second, and I'm paraphrasing and adding a few spices, obviously. He said, hold on a second, what do you mean by collective experiences? Do you mean your experience itself? Because if you just rely on just your experiences,
you can't know anything.
You can't know anything, you won't have much knowledge. If it's our collective experiences, well, how can you find out what other people's collective experiences
Testimony
are?
Again.
You have to believe they say
so
of others.
It's a shadow following us because you just can't escape it. Because we have a very short time to this show. What I really want to ask you now is, we've established this fundamental. We've established it's actually a misconception. A lot of people don't know why. Just before we do that, it doesn't mean we have to believe in everything that people say. But just like we don't have to believe in everything that we perceive, because our perceptions could be wrong. So there's problems with empiricism too. We're not going to observe all phenomena, right? And it doesn't mean we have to agree with everybody. And that's why in the past 30 years, in epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, they've agreed that testimony is fundamental, but they've discussed what constitutes testimony. And let me just give you a brief outline. You have, for example, as we said, Professor Cody, he said it's a fundamental source of knowledge. We've established that. You have Dr. Elizabeth Fricker. She makes a beautiful point. She says, given my limitations as parametric, meaning I have limitations, I'm not going to know everything. Therefore, for something, I have to rely on other people's say-so, their expertise, which is a fantastic point. You also have the emeritus Professor Keith Lehrer. He makes a really good point, and he says, well, we have to trust ourselves. We have to trust ourselves in the assessment on the trustworthiness of others. So when we're listening to the testimonial knowledge or we're reading it, then we have to somehow be trustworthy in our assessment of the trustworthiness of that person. So if you don't trust them, it won't constitute testimonial knowledge. That's profound. I mean,
that is profound. Also, you have Assistant Professor Benjamin McMillan. He makes a really good point. He says to solve the whole testimony issue, there needs to be a right of referral or deferral, a kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
So say you're giving testimonial knowledge via oral speech or via written works, and I'm the one who's accepting the testimony. I have to have the responsibility, right, to defer or refer back to you to challenge you. And you, as the person who's giving the testimonial knowledge, has to have the responsibility and accept the responsibility that you have to respond to my challenges. And that's going to constitute knowledge. So if I go to a lecture hall and the lecturer is basically giving me some knowledge of science or biology or physics or philosophy, and I'm just sitting there, I'm never going to challenge him. I don't even accept the responsibility of challenging him or referring back to him or deferring, certain challenges to him, and he doesn't accept that responsibility either. He says, I'm not going to respond to you, and he's just merely just talking. That doesn't constitute knowledge. What constitutes knowledge in terms of testimonial knowledge is that I'm able to challenge him and he can respond back to my challenges. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all of this, I know it's quite complicated, but it goes to show that not only is testimony a valid source, fundamental and valid source of knowledge, but at the same time, there's a huge study on what constitutes testimonial knowledge. And therefore, you can't say, well, we can't trust everything everyone says because some people are liars or they're false. Well, just like we can't trust our own senses sometimes. We don't have all the observations for particular phenomena.
It's just a practical part of reality, and we just have to look at ways of what's the best way of deferring and finding out.
I want to end on this. Let's end on this.
Sure.
Just to summarize this whole testimonial point. Prove to me that your mother gave birth to you, bro.
I can do a DNA test tomorrow.
You could do a DNA test. Have you done the DNA test?
No.
So why do you believe she's your mother now? She gave birth to you.
My dad told me, or
your dad told you.
Or the midwife or somebody.
Midwife testimonial. Even if you've had videos and pictures, you're not the same person, right? As you came out of the womb, right? Yeah. So it's all testimonial knowledge. I had someone say to me, "Well, I have a DNA test. I have a DNA test results, right?" Maybe they were joking, and I said, "Yes, that's still testimonial. Did you do it yourself?"
That's a good point.
Do you have a DNA test kit at home?
Yeah.
So this goes to show that some things that we do, many things that we have to rely on testimony,
and
which shows it's a valid source of knowledge. And if you remove that, and that's why Richard Dawkins has to be a bit more nuanced. If he removes that, you can't have any science, because a lot of the science that we do is based on previous experimentation. Now you may argue
we were doing experiments from the 7th century.
Yeah, but they may argue, but the reason we believe it because if we were to do the experiment again, we'll have the same results. But that's neither here or there, because number one, if you were to do, knowing that you may be able to do the experiment again and have the same results, it's still based on testimony.
Yeah.
Do you see? Until you've done it. And you may have done it once, but you can't practically do all the tests yourself. And that's the point. There's going to be somewhere, in some place, in science, where you have to rely on the say-so of others. If I pick a science textbook, say this was a science textbook, and I were to read it, I may be able to test in my lifetime 1/3 of the book, but the rest of it, which constitutes knowledge, I just have to believe in what they say.
Well, what about the rest of the library? You have to accept everything pretty much on testimony, and you can only test very few things.
As Dr. Elizabeth Fricker said, given my limitations, practical and non-practical, my intellectual capacities, my social capacities, that they're limited, I can't know everything myself. I have to rely on other people's knowledge, the testimony of other people. And that's why, even when we look from an Islamic perspective, just to end on this, we believe in the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We believe in the Quran because we believe these are ultimate testimonies. Yes, we can prove them empirically as well, and non-empirically and other things, but at the end of the day, it's a valid source of knowledge as well. Just the say-so of others, the say-so of God. And it's not just the say-so of God, because we can prove it came from God, but that's a different discussion for a different show. But to summarize this point, we have to rely on the say-so of others.
We do have to rely on the say-so of others, and Jazakallah khair for this. It's still an introduction.
Of course,
to testimony, because this is a deep.
It goes much deeper. We'll discuss it much further. But it's as an introduction to show that testimony is part of epistemology, and it's a valid source of knowledge.
Definitely. And if you'd like more information on this, then make sure you read an essay. I believe it's called God's Testimony. It's on our
IRA website, ira.org. Go to the education section, go to the essays, and you'll find it there.
And I'd like to end on a beautiful verse of the Quran. Allah says, and the meaning of the verse is, whose testimony is greater than Allah's. Jazakallah khair for listening to the show. Jazakallah khair for coming, bro. Assalamu alaikum. See you next time.